Hey, I'm Chris Zepp from Make Everything, and today we've got a great beginner's welding project. This is a hexagon planter made out of sheet metal using just a grinder and a welder. You can make this. I've got a free set of plans to go along with it. Let's get started. All right, so before we get started, I'm going to show you the template that I designed on the computer for this. The hexagon we're going to be cutting out is 10 inches wide, flat side to flat side, which makes it too big to print on one piece of paper. And it's going to have this little front on it, and it's going to have a 4-inch deep sidewall. So what I did was I designed a couple of pages on the computer that you can print out and then cut out. And once you cut these out, you can tape the two sides of the hexagon together and make this template. Now once you have the template, I'm going to be making this out of some 16 gauge mild steel, but you really could make it out of anything. And let's get started. So once you've made these templates and you know that the piece of material you have is big enough, you can either stick them down to the sheet metal, or what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trace them. And I'm going to lay them out in a way that it seems, efficient for the material. So I had looked at it before. If I go like this, and then we're going to need 6 of these rectangles, and I want to lay them out so I get 3 of them 2 times so that I only have 2 seams that I have to weld. So I'll trace these out and we'll be ready to go and cut it out with the angle grinder. Now I didn't cut this one out just because it's a pretty simple geometric shape. It's just 5 3/4 by 4. So my first mark will be at 5 3/4. My second mark will be at 11 1/2. And my next mark will be at 17 1/4. So these pieces are ready to cut out, and just for those that are going to wonder, the total size of material that I need for this is about 18 1/2 inches wide by, let's call it 17 1/2 inches tall. So if you got a cutoff piece from a metal supplier, this is a pretty small piece of what you would mainly consider scrap metal, or obviously you could break this up into multiple pieces. So let's get outside to the grinder and cut these out. So I like to do any sort of angle grinder cut-in outside just because it creates so much dust. And I love this little table because it flips open really fast, and it's got this kind of support on the side so I can cut in between, and I can put clamps and stuff on it. So let's get going. All right, so now these are cut out, we want to deburr them. They have a very, very sharp edge on them. Now the easiest way to do this would be on a belt grinder or a belt sander, but since I'm trying to do this low tech, I just put a grinding disc on my angle grinder, and we're just going to use this, and we're just going to carefully clamp these and lightly deburr the edges. So we're going to be folding this metal along these 4 lines. Now, if you had a finger brake or a bending brake, you wouldn't have to do any scoring. But again, we're going low tech here. So what I'm going to show you is a little trick that'll get you really sharp bends, similar to this one, by using your cutoff wheel to score the metal and then bend along that score. But we got to make sure we clamp this really well in order to do that. So we've got the 4 pieces that we need. Now they're covered in grinding dust, so we'll just clean them off real quick. So now that we've got all our material ready, we can actually start to bend these and try to make the shape that we're going for. You can see if I just push this on the edge of the table, I get a really, really nice sharp bend. And this is pretty forgiving. If you try to bend this back too many times, it will break on that seam. So if I were to try to straighten this back out, it would probably snap. But as long as I kind of take it easy and take my time, I can get a really accurate bend that's going to sit right on top of what will be the back of this planer really well. And the closer we get this before we start to weld it, the easier it's going to be for us to jig it up. So you can see super easy to bend around those corners. So that's pretty good. I know that it's gonna fit well on there once I start to tack this thing together. So I'm just gonna make a couple marks on the inside so that it can orient the exact same way. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually tack these 2 frames together first so that I have one continuous piece, and then I can manipulate it as one thing, get it situated on there, and start to weld it all up. The last piece we're gonna add is this face, and it's gonna sit like that. All right, so for this project, I'm going to use the Lincoln Power Mig 140 MP. This is a great beginner welder. This thing will do MIG, TIG, and stick, and it's super portable. This is my go-to for doing off-site MIG welding, stick welding, because I can just pick it up and carry it. And what we're going to be doing is setting it to 16 gauge material. It's got all the information inside the cover. I'll set this thing up, but if you're considering getting into welding, this thing is a great buy just because it's so capable, and you can really push your limits up with this before you upgrade to a bigger machine. Okay, so like I said, we're going to start by tacking together these 2 open sides. Now these are positionable magnets. You can get these pretty cheap on Amazon. I'll throw a link in the description. And these will just help you keep everything together while you position. There are obviously big ones and small ones. Help get everything in place so we can throw a tack on there and continue on from there. So these couple of tacks will just help me get this thing together. Now, I really wanted to weld this totally on the outside, so I shouldn't have done that one, but we'll make that one the bottom so you don't see it. Now what we can do is we can actually flip this over, and as long as we orient this thing back where it originally was, we can start to throw some tacks around the outside of this. Now we can use these little magnets again to keep this thing down and in place, and as we tack it, it'll all just sort of come together. Now we want to jump around this as we weld it because I don't want it to warp. So if I weld this whole side, this whole thing is going to open up. So as long as we sort of jump around it as we tack it, we can sort of zip it up, and then when we go back and grind it, it'll all grind out smooth. So with this tacked up, we can go back and throw a nice weld across these things. Now, if you wanted to, you could just leave these sort of tacked, and you could grind this and just sort of leave a little bit of an airline there, because welding these seams can be a little bit difficult. So I would recommend, before you go and weld a long seam like this in sheet metal, do some practice first, because it's really easy to create warping here. We're going to kind of stitch this up with a lot of smaller welds, and then we're going to come back, turn the machine down, and close these up. Okay, so we've got this thing all welded up. You know, welding the sheet metal, I'm real light with my trigger. And we talked about that one spot where I welded on the inside, which is right there. And what we're going to do is we're going to make that the bottom. And in order to do that, we're just going to weld this front plate right about here. So when we hang this thing on the wall, we'll have one welded seam on the top and one welded seam on the bottom. So I think it's best to kind of do it like this. Again, I'm going to use my little magnets. And gosh, this thing is hot. So use my little magnets, clamp this thing up, just sort of get it into place, take a look at it, make sure it looks pretty square, tack it up, and then weld it. All right, we're back outside to keep the dust contained, and I'm going to hit this with a 60 grit flap disc to just round over these corners, and then we're going to use a finishing disc to clean it all up. All right, so now that this thing is ground out, I've got a Pferd Combi Click surface conditioning pad on there, and I'm just going to kind of scuff back over these corners, get some of these heavy grind marks out, and this thing will be ready for finishing. All right, so you could stop here and leave it raw steel, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to blacken it with this Sculpt Nouveau Black Magic. This is a really easy metal finishing product. They make it in a bunch of different finishes and colors. I like the black. I'm going to follow it up with some black wax, which will protect it from corroding. This is essentially a controlled corrosion, which is going to blacken the steel. I'm going to clean it just with some water first, get some of the dust off of it, and then we'll apply the Black Magic. And what's nice about this stuff is, as opposed to some other blackening chemicals that you can get online, the Black Magic can go on to cold metal. It doesn't have to be put on hot. Some of the gun bluing and gun blackening products that exist, you have to put them on while the metal is hot. which obviously if you're in a small shop might not be super easy. So the way we're going to put this on, I'm going to turn the fan on because this stuff kind of smells, and I'll make sure I protect my hands with gloves and my eyes in case it splashes up, and just shake this and spray it on there. Now that I'm done applying the finish, I'm going to neutralize it with this just water. Spray this thing down, it'll stop the reaction, and I can wipe down and get the final finish off of it. Now once I've dried all the water out of this, I'm going to go back with from the same company. This is from Sculpt Nouveau. This is black wax, and what this will do is it'll just add a protective layer and also darken up the finish just a little bit more. Now you could just use the black wax, but I like the darkness that comes with the actual blackening spray itself. So we'll use some of this. And I forgot how much this stuff stinks, so now I've got my respirator on, and I'll finish this up. I do have a fan going above this to suck some of the fumes out, so you want to make sure you do this either outside or in a well-ventilated area. So at this point the wax is dry and it's smooth to the touch. You can kind of buff it with a rag, and it's got a lot of dimension to it, which is really nice. It's probably a little hard to see on camera, but there's a ton of depth in this, and it doesn't look the same from any angle. So it's a lot different than like black spray paint. And you can see how the back of it, when I sprayed in that black magic, it kind of splattered. So there's this really beautiful kind of gold look in the back. I really like the blackened effect on this type of steel, and when it hangs on a light colored wall, there's going to be a really beautiful contrast. Okay, so before I brought it home, I just took a small drill bit and I popped a little hole in the top, and I put a nail in the wall, and it's pretty lightweight, so you can just hang it on the wall. It also looks really nice on a shelf, but when you hang it on a shelf or put it on a shelf, it sort of sits on its side. But on a wall, it'll hang nice and level. And now we can add some floral foam, and in our case, I'm going to use some fake succulents and some artificial garden moss to give it a little bit of an organic look. And since they're fake, I don't have to worry about killing them like every other plant that I've ever had. Easy way to add the garden foam, if you just sort of hold it up and then take a knife or a pencil and mark it on the back side using the actual planter as a guide, you'll get little marks. You can cut this stuff with like a kitchen knife, and then it'll sit nicely right inside the planter on the wall. So my girlfriend stepped in and did this beautiful arrangement. These are just plastic succulents stuck in that foam with a little bit of moss. This will last forever, and if you want to, you can just take these out and change them out later on, or do something different. Overall, I'm really happy with the way this thing came out. All right, that about does it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really wanted to make a video showing how you don't need a lot of special tools to make cool home decor stuff like this. This was inspired by a similar planter that I saw at a garden store, and I thought, wow, you know, instead of buying this, I can build one myself. The plans are very easy to follow, and all you need, like I showed you, is an angle grinder and a MIG welder to do this project. You don't need to blacken it. You could leave it raw steel. You could paint it. You could nest these together, and really you could take the plans that I've made and scale them for different sizes. So if you want to check these out, there's a link down in the description. And I'm looking for a way to sell these as a weldable kit too, so stay tuned for that. If you have any questions, please leave them down below in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them. And if you want to see what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis in the shop, you can follow me on Instagram here at Make Everything Shop. I post every day on my stories and on my feed, and I share a lot of behind the scenes footage of when I'm doing projects like this and other stuff in the shop. I really hope you enjoyed this. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share with friends, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Again, I'm Chris Zepp from Make Everything. Thank you to Lincoln for supporting me in my shop, providing me with welders like the one you saw. Check out the MP140, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thanks.